family. How are you doing today? I hope you and your loved ones are doing well. The times that we live in today are quite challenging, and so it is important that we make a practice of checking in on one another. So I hope you are well. Welcome to another topical episode of Conversations with Modee. If this is your first time here and you're wondering what we are all about, well, I'm glad that you've joined us, because on this platform, we openly and transparently share about life's experiences for the purpose of learning, of growing in our faith, of living with intention, and finding grace, that is God, in the everyday life. This we do so that we can grow in depth and live life to the full, just as Jesus intended for each and every one of us to live. Today, we want to discuss what is commonly known as the golden rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. Have you ever wondered where or how it became the golden rule? Although it was popularized in culture, it actually has its roots deep in Jesus' guidance on living the God way. This account can be found in the book of Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 to 40. Jesus was responding to a lawyer of the day. They were known as Pharisees. This one was well versed in the scriptures, and they wanted to know which was the greatest commandment or instruction, although the Bible lets us know that this person was trying to trick Jesus by that question. The response that Jesus gave to this Pharisee, to this lawyer, is one that remains an instruction for us today, and it shows that the two greatest principles to live life by are to love God and to love people. You might have heard me say this on past episodes. For example, when we looked at what is sin. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. My saying is well anchored in this Bible passage. Loving people is a fundamental principle on how we ought to treat one another. Every day, we should do this with genuine care, with compassion, fairness, empathy, and respect. It doesn't matter whether you know the person or not. You should treat them the same way you'd want to be treated. Sometimes I watch shows that show random acts of kindness, and I must confess, I get filled with tears simply because they have become very far and in between things to see these days. People don't normally show care. So if each one of us were to take time to observe who is around us and to choose to lend a helping hand rather than ignore or worse, take advantage of such people, then our world would be in a much better place for all to live in. I believe that kindness lives in every heart. We just need to let it shine through. Sometimes it's as simple as saying hello to someone who you see or observe is looking lonely. What may seem too little a gesture to you could absolutely make someone else's day. The only thing that is required is for you to take that first step and reach out. I'd like to read you an excerpt from my book, Being Different. It tells the story of how you shouldn't treat people. I know that's a bit tricky. I normally read the how you should, but this time I want to talk about how you shouldn't treat people. But before we read the story, let me ask, have you got your copy yet? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? Copies are available on Amazon or Draft to Digital, and for bookstores, you can get it on Ingram Spark at discounted prices. So let's get back to this story. This one is taken from the chapter titled Girls of Prayer. Now, the setting of this you will need to read for yourself when you get your copy. But we were in school, in a boarding school, and I was in year 9, and we had some schoolgirls in year 12 We had an extension, so only the 2 sets were in school. So I read. It says, one fateful afternoon, I went to the taps with some of my classmates to fetch water. It was at the time of day we had observed that the taps were often quiet because there were no Form 6 girls looking around. Those are the Year 12 girls. And my set girls were few, so there were no queues. On the way back, we noticed the kitchen ladies were setting up the tables for dinner, and we were completely surprised that it happened that early, as it was more than an hour before the time we would normally have heard the school bells rang for food. Hastening back to the quadrangle, that is, the dormitory where we lived, we alerted other girls so that everyone could get some food for once before it all got raided by the Form 6 girls. But one of the girls who had an appetite for a little bit of adventure and troublemaking had an even better idea, I thought. She decided to rally up some others, seeing as this has presented the perfect opportunity for a showdown. The meal that evening was moi moi. This is the Nigerian bean pudding with ogi, a white-colored custard made from corn. Although it wasn't one of my favorites at that time, I joined the herd of girls who were now heading to the dining halls. We split ourselves between the Form 3 and the Form 6 dining halls and carted away most, if not all, of the food pots on the table, taking them to our dormitory. Upon getting to quadrangle, those who wanted the meal had their fill, and we intentionally littered the remainder all over the quarters in the middle and open area of quadrangle. By the time the Form 6 girls got to the dining halls, before ringing the bell in their usual practice, they were met with empty tables. Realizing that we must have gotten there first, they stormed down to our dorm and were visibly livid to find that we not only took their food, but had wasted it by decorating the quadrangle lawns with it. Unlike them, we were used to going hungry because of their practice, so this comeback of ours was a major blow for them. To fully understand their predicament, imagine that you're starving, but the only meal available is lying in front of you, mingled with sand. It was a real-life application of Newton's third law of motion, which says, action and reaction are equal but opposite in direction. In that story, we were treated badly and we equally reacted badly. Yes, it might be the case of what you sow, you will reap. But I love that particular Bible verse in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 to 9 ends with the Apostle Paul, that's the writer of the book, encouraging us not to get tired of doing what is good. Think, if I were in such and such situation, what would I want someone else to do? How would I want them to treat me? Then do that which is good. This is what is empathy. Particularly, Jesus asks us to look out for one another and to look out for the vulnerable, that is, older people, children, the poor, widows, and even foreigners. These are groups of people who are often ignored by society, and they are left most times without help. The point for us is not to judge how or why they are in such and such situation, or if they have the same belief as you have. Jesus' instruction is that if you happen to observe the situation, then responsibility is on you to provide help in the best way that you can and to keep it moving. That is, don't expect anything back. Jesus teaches this by telling us the story, the Good Samaritan story, in the book of Luke chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. You may also have heard of this. I'd like to read that story so that we get the good context of what it is about. The passage reads, "On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. 'Teacher,' he asked, 'what must I do in order to inherit eternal life?' 'What is written in the law?' Jesus asked, or Jesus replied. 'How do you read it?' He answered," that is the person who asked the question, "'Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.' Jesus then replied, 'You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live.' But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Do we not often ask such questions? In reply, Jesus said to him, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that same road, and when he had seen the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, that was his means of transportation then, and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, the money they spent then, and gave them to the innkeeper. And he said, 'Look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Then Jesus asked, 'Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?' The expert in the law replied, 'The one who had mercy on him.' I think it's quite obvious in the story. So Jesus said to him, 'Go and do likewise.'" Just to give you a better context of what the story is and the importance of the story and the need for us to be kind, no matter the circumstance that we are in. In Jesus' days, Samaritans were despised. They were not the well-respected people in the society, whereas the Levites were the chosen ones, the ones that God expected to know his ways, to know his heart, and to be able to do them. Yet, because of another rule that existed, another commandment that asked the Levites not to touch dead things, the Levites, seeing this dying person, walked away, while the Samaritan was the one that attended to the wounds of this person. If you notice in that passage, Jesus ended that story by telling us that the person who truly did what God was expecting is the Samaritan. And did you notice how Jesus said to us, "Go and do likewise"? This tells us that you cannot really say that you love God if you don't love people, irrespective of their religious beliefs, their culture, skin tone, age, the neighborhood they live in, or the abilities that they have. You may not agree with the choices that they've made, but you must treat them with kindness and with love. And this you can start wherever you are today. An old hymn puts it this way: "Have I done any good in the world today? Have I helped anyone in need? Have I cheered up the sad, made someone feel glad? If not, I have failed indeed. Has anyone's burden been lighter today because I was willing to share? Have the sick and the weary be helped on their way? When they needed my help, was I there? Wake up and do something more than dream of your mansion above. Doing good is a pleasure, a joy without measure, a blessing of duty and love. You know, Jesus himself showed us the ultimate kindness by laying down his life for us to get us out of our deepest troubles. Romans chapter 5 verse 6 to 8 helps us to know that while we were helpless and without hope, Christ Jesus died for us. Remember that you have been shown so much grace and mercy and should in turn show others kindness. You can demonstrate this in ways such as lending a helping hand to someone that is in need. You can choose to go against the popular behaviors in wherever situation you're in by being kind to someone who might be mistreated. You can be a friend to someone that others overlook. You can choose not to judge someone for their choices, but helping them to find a way out of the trouble that they are in. Perhaps you're a sports person or a business person. For you, it may look like competing fairly and not cheating others just to get a win. For leaders, this could look like lifting up those who are around you to help them grow in their own giftings. For a parent, this could mean standing by your child who perhaps is going the wrong way right now, but by you being a consistent example of love to them, they are able to find their way back to the path of light. For friends, neighbors, this could mean choosing not to backbite or to tear others down, but to be their cheerleader until they succeed in their endeavor. The examples are endless. What is important to know is that every one of us needs somebody. Bear in mind we're only on this earth for a little while, whether you're going to be 10 or 100 years old. How do you want to be remembered? Would you be remembered for how well you treated people? How about trying a little kindness today? And while you're about showing kindness, God expects us to extend this even also to animals and to plants and everything in this created world. We have the responsibility to look after people and every one of the created things. Wherever you are, can I encourage you or can I challenge you to live true to your God-given purpose? This must be underpinned by love. I trust you will. Like Jesus, I encourage you to go about doing good. Friends, this brings us to the end of today's episode. Did you learn something new? Or did something occur to you for the first time? Why don't you let us know in the comments? And if you know someone that can benefit from this, why don't you share with them so that they too can learn, they too can glean a thing or two from this episode and also lead a life of love for themselves. Let's keep spreading love and kindness wherever we are. Until the next episode, remember to subscribe, like, and share. And in all that you do, keep living with intention and live with eternity on your mind.